All right, guys, I'm going to try to explain this all integer method with an example here, and I'm doing this by myself, so if the quality's bad, I apologize. I'm using my smartphone to do this. So here is my system of linear equations that I'm going to first convert to the augmented matrix. So that's going to be 3, 3, negative 1, 10, Now, the first thing that we do when we do the all integer method is we identify our first pivot, which will always be the upper left-hand number, and our previous pivot is always understood to be 1. On our second matrix, we will write the top row, the pivot row, exactly as it was, and below the current pivot, we will change those to zeros. We have 6 calculations to do. Those calculations are going to use this formula here, where I have A, D, B, C, and then this is the previous pivot. So it'll be A times D minus B times C divided by the previous pivot. So to get the answer here, I'm going to do 3 times negative 1 minus 3 times 1 divided by 1, so that's going to be negative 3 minus 3, so that is negative 6. 15 plus 1, that's 16, divided by 1, so that's 16. Negative 18 minus 10, negative 28. 9 minus 3, that's 6, divided by 1, which is 6. 6 plus 1, so that's 7. 15 minus 10, so that's 5. Next, we're going to identify our new pivot. Our new pivot is going to be the next number along the main diagonal, so it will be negative 6. Our previous pivot will be identified as this previous pivot, which was 3. Our next matrix, we're going to leave the pivot row exactly as it is. And we're going to add zeros above and below the new pivot. This previous 0 stays 0, and then here's the tricky part. This previous pivot is going to change to the new pivot of negative 6. So now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 things I'm going to do, and I'm going to go run and grab my calculator so that I don't make a careless mistake. Okay, to get this number here, I'm going to multiply, our pivot here is negative 6. So to get this number, I'm going to go negative 6 times negative 1 minus 3 times 16, and then divide that by 3. The answer is negative 14, and I'll write that in green. This number here is going to be negative 6 times 10 minus 3 times negative 28 divided by 3. Please note that I am dividing by 28 on these because my previous pivot. And I get 8. To get this number down here, I'm going to do negative 6 times 7 minus 16 times 6 divided by 3. And that's negative 46. The last number is negative 6 times 5 minus negative 28 times 6 divided by 3. And then that's 46. Again, each time I'm going through and finding these green numbers, I'm using this formula. You go from the pivot to the diagonal number, and then you use the other diagonal as the subtraction product, and then divide by the previous pivot. All right, so the next matrix. Before we do that, we need to go ahead and identify again what our new pivot is. Our original pivot was the left-hand top, then the middle, so the next one's going to be this negative 46. I'm going to identify that. The previous pivot was -6. We're gonna leave the pivot row exactly as it is. That was a +46. Above the pivot will become 0. Previous zeros to the left of the pivot stay 0. And then all the previous pivots will change to that -46. So now we only have 2 calculations to do. To get the top calculation, we're going to start with our pivot, as we always do. We're going to take -46 times 8 minus 46 times -14, and then divide by -6. And that's where I've got my calculator out, because I do not want to mess that up. That's -46. -46. -46 times -28 minus 16 times 46 divided by -6. And I get -92. We only had 2 calculations there. We are pretty much at the end, but before we finish this off, please note that there were 6 calculations, then there were 4 calculations, and now there's only 2. So the last thing that we need to do is go ahead and we're going to divide through, if you will, by -46, or if you want to think about that as multiplying by the reciprocal. So our final row reduced form is going to be 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1. Now, -46 divided into -46 is obviously +1. -46 divided into -42 is +2. And then -46 divided into 46 is -1. So that tells us that the solution for our system is 1, 2, -1.